Before Tupac became a legend, his godmother was already America's most wanted. She just died in Cuba at 78, but her final words about Tupac reveal a truth about his death that nobody ever pieced together.
And we've got to stop what is happening to our children,
What she said about who really killed Tupac will change everything you thought you knew. The OG connection that built hip-hop's realest voice. 2025 was the year the streets lost another real one. Assata Shakur, the sister whose name been ringing bells in the hood and courtrooms for damn near 50 years, passed away in Havana, Cuba on September 25th, 78 years on this earth, and she went out on her own terms, still free, still unbowed, still that same revolutionary that the feds couldn't break no matter how hard they tried. But real talk, this ain't just about Assata's death. This is about family, about legacy, about a bond between a godmother and her godson that shaped hip-hop's most authentic voice. See, Assata Shakur wasn't just some activist you read about in Black History Month. She was Tupac Shakur's godmother, his blood, his people. And the connection between these two legendary figures runs deeper than the Mariana Trench, deeper than most cats in the game ever understood. To really get it, we gotta rewind the tape all the way back. Back when Assata Shakur was born Joanne Deborah Byron on July 16, 1947 in Queens, New York. Same borough that would later birth Nas, 50 Cent, and countless other lyrical assassins. Young Joanne wasn't born into the struggle. The struggle was born into her. Her parents split when she was 3 years old in 1950, and Shorty found herself bouncing between New York City and the Jim Crow South of North Carolina, where racism wasn't just some abstract concept. It was the air you breathed, the water you drank, the boots on your neck every single day. Money was tight, mad tight. Young Joanne was constantly running away from home, searching for something she couldn't name but knew she needed. But everything shifted when she moved in with her aunt, Evelyn A. Williams, a civil rights worker in Manhattan, who put her on game, helped her get that GED, and eventually made it to college. Picture this, a young black woman in her early 20s hitting up borough of Manhattan Community College and City College of New York during the mid-1960s, right when the civil rights movement was at its peak, when Malcolm was preaching, when the Panthers were rising, when the whole country was ready to explode. Shorty got involved in protests demanding more black faculty and a black studies program, and in 1967, she caught her first arrest during a sit-in at BMCC. This wasn't just activism, this was awakening, this was transformation. This was a young sister realizing that everything they taught her in school was straight cap. The education system had been feeding her lies, sanitized history that left out all the real shit about how this country treated its black citizens. The cognitive dissonance was too much to handle, so Joanne Deborah Byron shed that slave name and became Assata Olugbala Shakur, she who struggles for the people and the thankful one. That's some powerful shit right there. Literally naming yourself after your purpose, your mission, your entire reason for being. In 1970, while she was still in college, Assata joined the Black Panther Party's New York City chapter, pulled in by that 10-point program that wasn't playing no games. The Panthers weren't just talking that talk, they were walking that walk, implementing real programs in the hood. We talking free breakfast for the shorties, community health clinics, education programs, all that. Assata moved to Oakland, the BPP's headquarters where it all jumped off, to organize protests and teach the people, then came back to run the Harlem chapter. In Harlem, she coordinated programs that fed thousands of kids and provided medical care to folks who couldn't afford it. These weren't just political stunts for the cameras. These were real moves, putting food in hungry bellies, medicine in sick bodies, knowledge in empty minds. This was that boots on the ground work that actually changed lives in the hood. But it wasn't all love in the Panthers. Assata started peeping game on all the macho BS from the brothers and their lack of knowledge about African American history, which started making her feel some type of way. And then the whole organization started beefing internally, like when your favorite rap group breaks up over creative differences, but with way higher stakes.
Well, I see it as an attack, really, a sort of covert, sneaky attack on Cuba. I think that the governments, all of them that in recent memory, have wanted to destroy the Cuban people, really, and their insistence on their freedom and their dignity. And I think this is a way of saying that, you have a, quote, terrorist there, and we have a right to go in and get her. And so this could cause a very big fight between these countries, which have never had peace in my lifetime.
In February 1971, hit the fan when Eldridge Cleaver publicly called out Huey Newton on TV, leading to Cleaver getting the boot and mad retaliation that left 4 members dead. Hundreds of Panthers bounced after that. And you already know the FBI was stirring the pot through COINTELPRO, writing fake letters to create beef between the brothers. From all that chaos came the Black Liberation Army, basically the Panthers' younger, wilder cousin, made up of East Coast cats who were tired of playing nice and wanted to take it straight to the streets. They were inspired by guerrilla fighters from Vietnam and Algeria, studying that real revolution revolutionary tactics. Assata linked up with the BLA by 1971 after leaving the Panthers, ready to take the struggle to the next level. Now, while all this was popping off, another crucial piece of the puzzle was coming together. On June 16, 1971, in East Harlem, a baby boy came into the world named Lassane Parrish Crooks. But this wasn't just any baby. This was the son of Afeni Shakur, a prominent Black Panther who got acquitted in the Panther 21 trial while she was pregnant with him. That's right, moms beat the case while carrying him. That's some OG shit right there. And here's where the family tree gets real interesting. Afeni married Mutulu Shakur in 1975, and Mutulu wasn't just some dude off the streets. He was Assata's brother, a doctor and acupuncturist who was treating addicts in Harlem, also deep in the BLA game. This marriage made Assata young Tupac's step-aunt and godmother, a role that went way beyond just showing up to birthdays with toys. The baby, who started as Lassane Parrish Crooks, got renamed Tupac Amaru Shakur after the Inca revolutionary Tupac Amaru II. That name was a whole prophecy, a burden, a calling card. You don't name your kid after a revolutionary and expect him to become an accountant, you feel me? Growing up, young Tupac was surrounded by stories of Panther soldiers and government persecution. In a 1991 interview with Davy D, Pac straight up said, "Mutulu Shakur is my stepfather. Assata Shakur is my auntie." You know what I'm saying? I come from a rich line of Panthers and straight revolutionaries. This wasn't flexing. This was stating facts, owning his lineage, claiming his heritage. As a shorty, Tupac was writing poetry for imprisoned Panthers, pieces that reflected all the pain and injustice he was seeing around him. His exposure to revolutionary politics wasn't academic. It was lived experience. It was family dinner table conversation. It was the air he breathed. But fate had some cruel plans for this revolutionary family. On May 2nd, 1973, Assata and two BLA members got pulled over on the New Jersey Turnpike for a busted taillight. What went down next became one of the most controversial incidents in American legal history. A shootout that left Trooper Werner Forster dead, one of Assata's comrades killed, and Assata herself severely wounded.
Imprisoned. I was shot with my hands in the air. I was accused of a wide variety of crimes, all of which, with the exception of the murder of a New Jersey state trooper, I was acquitted. I was tried for the murder of a New Jersey state trooper by an all-white jury in a highly prejudiced county where something like 70% of those polled already believed I was guilty.
Assata maintained she was shot with her hands up and never touched a weapon, and the evidence backed her up. No gunpowder residue on her hands. Medical experts testified that her nerve damage made it impossible for her to shoot. But in 1977, an all-white jury convicted her of first-degree murder anyway, hitting her with life plus 26, 33 years. That's what they call a legal lynching in the hood. The escape that made her a legend, and the words that changed everything. Then came November 2nd, 1979, the night that Assata Shakur became straight legend status in the streets. This wasn't no movie script. This was real-life action movie type shit. 3 armed soldiers rolled up to the Clinton Correctional Facility for women, posing as visitors, using fake IDs like they were there for a social call. But they came strapped for war. These cats, linked to the BLA and the May 19th Communist Organization, pulled out .45s and reportedly a stick of dynamite, took 2 COs hostage, and executed the whole operation smooth as butter. Nobody got hurt as they commandeered a prison van, drove it across a field like they were in Grand Theft Auto, and switched to 2 getaway whips waiting in a nearby lot. The whole move was funded by a $105,000 lick they hit on a Bamberger store in Paramus, New Jersey. That's that real guerrilla warfare financing. You gotta get the bread to fund the revolution somehow. And just like that, Assata Shakur vanished into the underground like a ghost, becoming a living legend, a symbol that the system couldn't hold her even with all its power. For young Tupac, who was only 8 years old when this went down, his godmother just became something more than human. She became myth. She became proof that you could beat the system if you were smart enough, brave enough, committed enough. Mutulu Shakur ended up getting knocked in 1986 for armed robbery and helping Assata escape, doing time until 2022 before passing in 2023. The whole family paid the price for that revolutionary life. Assata laid low in Pittsburgh for almost a year, then bounced to the Bahamas before finally touching down in Cuba in 1984. Fidel Castro gave her asylum, calling her a victim of political persecution, a decision that made her a permanent piece in the chess game between the US and Cuba. Tupac was about 13 when Assata reached Cuba, and while no documented visits happened because of US travel restrictions and her fugitive status, that spiritual connection stayed strong. Afeni kept Assata's name alive in their household, and Tupac absorbed her story like it was scripture. Then Tupac started spitting bars, and his music wasn't just entertainment, it was testimony, it was prophecy, it was truth wrapped in rhythm. In his debut album Tupacalypse Now from 1991, specifically in Words of Wisdom, wisdom, Pac shouted out Assata in the outro, declaring, "New African Panthers, America's Nightmare. Mutulu Shakur, America's Nightmare. Geronimo Pratt, America's Nightmare. Assata Shakur, America's Nightmare." This wasn't subtle. Pac was publicly claiming his lineage, letting the world know where he came from, who raised him, what values he carried. The track was all about black unity and resistance, with Assata positioned right next to legends like Huey Newton and Malcolm X. But yo, here's where it gets deep. What did Assata actually think about Tupac? This is the part that should hit different for everybody who claims to really know Pac's story. Because of her exile situation, Assata's public statements about Tupac are rare as hell, usually filtered through activists or republished in underground outlets. However, researchers found one primary source that changes everything: an interview conducted after 1996 by Chinganji Akinyela of the New African People's Organization, republished in activist media, where Assata directly addressed Tupac's life, his music, and his death. In this interview, Assata dropped some real talk that every hip-hop head needs to hear. She said, and you need to let these words marinate, "I love his music, even when I don't agree with what he's saying or the premises he's operating on." He was able to touch so much gut stuff that most people don't even recognize, much less have the ability to express. Let that sink in. A revolutionary who sacrificed everything, her freedom, her country, her ability to see her family, was acknowledging that even when she didn't agree with Pac's message, she recognized his genius. She called him a genius with immense talent, someone who could put words to pain that people didn't even know they were feeling. But Assata kept it 100 about the contradictions too. She addressed what she called that contradictory consciousness running through Tupac's work, his revolutionary roots clashing with gangster rap, the tension between empowerment and glorifying violence, between consciousness and materialism.
Was Assata Shakur, and that's from Eyes of the Rainbow. Alice Walker, after the roadside shooting in which Assata Shakur was severely wounded, and she went to trial and was convicted, a crime she says she didn't commit. She escaped from prison and got political asylum in Cuba, where she has lived for decades. Your thoughts on what has most recently happened, her being added to the terrorist list?
Well, I see it as an attack, really, a sort of covert, sneaky attack on Cuba. I think that the governments, all of them that in recent memory, have wanted to destroy the Cuban people, really, and their insistence on their freedom and their dignity.
She compared this to earlier cats like Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver, saying, "That contradictory consciousness you're talking about is all over the place. Unfortunately, it's nothing new. The mind-destroying machine works overtime, getting us to crave power and money instead of justice." Then came the words that should haunt everybody who loved Tupac, the real talk that needs to be heard. Tupac was an exception. He was only 25 when he died, and one of the things that makes me sad is that there was no strong community of African revolutionaries to protect him and help educate him. Those who loved him did all they could, but they were competing with some very forceful, seductive, negative influences. Yo, read that again. Assata wasn't just mourning Pac's death. She was calling out the whole community, including the revolutionary movement that should have protected him. She was saying that while his peoples tried, they couldn't compete with all the negative forces pulling him toward destruction. That's powerful. That's real. That's the truth that hurts. On September 7th, 1996, everything came crashing down. Tupac hit up the Mike Tyson versus Bruce Seldon fight at the MGM Grand in Vegas with Suge Knight and the whole Death Row crew. After the fight, around 8:45 p.m., they spotted Orlando Anderson, a Southside Crip, in the MGM lobby. Pac and his peoples jumped on dude. The whole thing caught on camera. A few hours later, at 11:15 p.m. at East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, a white Cadillac pulled up on Suge's BMW, and somebody in the back seat let loose with a .40 Cal Glock, hitting Tupac 4 times, twice in the chest, once in the arm, once in the thigh. Suge caught some fragments and drove to safety. Paramedics rushed them both to University Medical Center. Tupac went through 3 surgeries, including having his right lung removed. He was sedated and on life support, his body fighting a battle it couldn't win. On September 13th at 4:03 p.m., Tupac Amaru Shakur died from respiratory failure and cardiac arrest. 25 years old, gone too soon. The legacy that'll never die. When Assata got word about Tupac's death, she didn't just cry. She analyzed it like only someone who survived decades of government persecution could. In that crucial interview, she dropped some knowledge about the circumstances surrounding his murder that everybody needs to hear. "It's a definite possibility," she said, when asked if government tactics like COINTELPRO had targeted Tupac. "Divide and conquer is what the FBI does best. So yes, I believe the government encouraged this infighting, and I wouldn't be surprised to find out that they set Tupac up more than once." She connected it straight to his music. "I believe the political political nature of some of his songs. Without having insider knowledge, I just generally assume that he is targeted by the government because of the political nature of his work. Now, Assata wasn't about to go full conspiracy theorist. She was too smart for that. But her speculation aligned with documented facts. COINTELPRO had systematically targeted black activists through surveillance, infiltration, fake accusations, and straight-up provocation. Why would it be different for a young black man with millions of followers who was literally named after a revolutionary and descended from Panthers? But the realest part of Assata's reflection wasn't about government plots. It was about community accountability. She said we needed to learn from the tragedy. There's nothing we can do to bring Tupac back, but we can learn from his death. We need to work to create a world where the Tupacs of the world can grow and love and not be afraid that some fool with a Glock is going to blow their brains out. And when people kept asking about those theories that Pac faked his death, theories that still pop up on social media every September, Assata shut that down as nonsense, saying we needed to focus on real talk instead of fantasy.
I was subsequently convicted. I was sentenced to life plus 30 years in prison, plus 30 years because I would not stand up for the judge. I spent 6.5 years in prison. 2 of those 6.5 years I spent in solitary confinement in men's prisons, which was against New Jersey law, but nevertheless, that's where I was sent, and that's where I spent 2 years.
The parallels between Assata and Tupac's lives are almost too perfect. Both faced constant surveillance and persecution. Both got hit with politically motivated charges. Both became larger-than-life symbols of resistance, and both ended up on FBI's most wanted list at some point. On May 2nd, 2013, exactly 40 years after the New Jersey Turnpike shooting, the FBI added Assata to its most wanted terrorist list, making her the first woman ever placed on it. The bounty hit $2 million, split between the FBI and New Jersey. The decision sparked mad controversy, with the Center for Constitutional Rights calling it a cynical attempt to inflame public opinion, tying it back to COINTELPRO's legacy. Critics said putting the terrorist label on a 40-year-old case was just political theater to pressure Cuba. But Assata stayed in Cuba, protected by a government that refused to extradite her despite decades of U.S. pressure. In Cuba, she worked as an English editor for Radio Havana and became a symbol of resistance, influencing not just hip-hop, but whole movements for racial justice, including Black Lives Matter and groups named after her like Assata's Daughters. Her influence on hip-hop went way beyond Tupac. Common created a song for Assata in 2000, telling her whole story over a soulful beat with her voice sampled in it. Public Enemy shouted her out as Chesimard in Rebel Without a Pause back in 1988. The Roots name-dropped her in Section in 1996, and Saul Williams listed her among activists in coded language in 2001. Even Jay-Z sampled her voice. The reach was crazy. Assata had become like a patron saint of conscious rap, a reminder that hip-hop could be more than just party music, that it could be revolution wrapped in beats and rhymes. Now here's where things come full circle in a wild way. In September 2023, nearly 27 years after Tupac got killed, Vegas police finally arrested Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, charging him with first-degree murder for allegedly orchestrating the hit that took Pac out. Davis had basically snitched on himself through his 2019 memoir, Compton Street Legend, and various interviews where he admitted to being in the white caddy and providing the burner. But here's the twist. In those same statements, Davis claimed that Sean Diddy Combs had offered $1 million to take out both Tupac and Suge Knight. Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, has been telling feds to follow the paperwork, specifically talking about a $1 million check he says he saw, potentially linking Diddy to the murder. Diddy has denied everything, calling it all beyond ridiculous and completely false, and Vegas police have said he's never been a suspect. Tupac's family hired attorney Alex Spiro in October 2024 to investigate potential Diddy connections, and Keefe D's trial is set for February 2026. The case is still unfolding, potentially about to reveal truths that have been hidden for 3 decades.
I miss, on real terms, I miss African-American culture. I miss friends, family, and that's very real, and that's a kind of gap in my life. But on the other hand, adapting to Cuba, while it hasn't been easy, I've had to learn another language, and you spend the first 3 or 4 years learning another language feeling like an idiot because you really can't communicate, and you communicate at such a low level. People say, they kind of see you as an idiot because your conversation is kind of on an idiotic level.
Meanwhile, back in Cuba, Asada lived her final years in peace. In interviews from exile, she described Cuba as the first time she'd ever lived in a society that is at peace, where she could finally relax and realize the devastating effect of what 30-some years had meant to me growing up and living in a society that was totally hostile to me as a human being.
It's the first time I've ever liked a president, I've ever listened to political speeches intensely. It was the first time I've ever lived in a society that was at peace with itself. I mean, that I felt free to walk down the street, that I felt, because I'm weird. If I'm writing maybe 3 o'clock, I get the urge to take a walk. And I can do that here.
She spoke about finally connecting with her daughter, who was born while Asada was locked up, forming a very close relationship in Cuba's supportive environment. She taught, she wrote, she studied, even earned a master's degree in social science, but she never stopped being that revolutionary. In her interviews, Asada continued calling out systemic injustice with the same fire she had as a young Panther. She spoke on racism, imperialism, and the need for healing in oppressed communities, always connecting personal struggle to the bigger picture of power and oppression.
So I think that we have got to educate ourselves and prepare ourselves to fight a repressive system, an oppressive system, and a system that smashes the human being to the point where people don't even remember how to take a walk, how to say good morning, how to smile at each other. We have to take this planet back from the beasts that are controlling it right now.
When Assata Shakur passed on September 25, 2025, tributes came from all corners of the world. Groups like Black Lives Matter and the Chicago Teachers Union honored her as a revolutionary fighter, while New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy called such tributes shameful. The division was expected. It had always been there, would always be there when it comes to figures who challenge power so completely. But what really matters isn't what politicians or FBI directors thought about Assata Shakur. What matters is what she represented, what she fought for, and the legacy she left in the streets. That legacy lives strongest in the words and music of her godson, Tupac Shakur. Every time somebody plays words of wisdom and hears Pac declare, Assata Shakur, America's nightmare, they're not just hearing a name, they're hearing a proclamation of lineage, a refusal to forget, a promise to keep the struggle going. Compare Assata, who found peace in exile, to Tupac, who died not trusting nobody, surrounded by bodyguards and enemies real and imagined, caught in the crossfire of beefs he didn't start but couldn't escape. The contrast is devastating. Assata lived to 78, Tupac died at 25. Assata escaped the trap. Tupac got consumed by it. And yet, this is crucial, Assata never claimed to be better than Tupac. Instead, she said the system failed him, that he needed protection and guidance that wasn't there, that the pull of the streets and the music industry was too strong for even someone with his revolutionary lineage to resist alone. This is what changes everything about how we understand Pac's story. It's not about moral failure or personal weakness. It's about what happens when you're born into a war that started before you were born, when you're named after a revolutionary martyr, when your godmother is a wanted fugitive, when your family's love language is sacrifice and struggle. In her reflections on race and revolution, Assata stated, "As long as imperialism exists, you will have racism." This wasn't pessimism, it was analysis. And it applies directly to understanding what killed Tupac. It wasn't just gang violence or East-West beef. It was imperialism's violence working through individuals who had been systematically denied other options, other outlets, other ways of existing. The same system that put Assata on trial with an all-white jury, that shot her with her hands up, that chased her out the country. That same system created the conditions where Tupac could be murdered in cold blood on a Vegas street. Different tactics, same war. Assata's autobiography ends with her in Cuba, and she writes about finding peace she never experienced in America, but she never forgot where she came from, never stopped fighting, never stopped teaching. Her legacy lived through Tupac's music, through every conscious rapper who came after, through every activist who quoted her words, through every movement that drew inspiration from her refusal to be broken. The final lesson from Assata's last words about Tupac isn't about conspiracy theories or government plots, though those might be real. The final lesson is simpler and more real. Genius isn't enough, talent isn't enough, good intentions aren't enough. What you need is community, protection, guidance, love, and space to grow. What you need is what Tupac didn't have, what Assata recognized he didn't have only after it was too late. In one of her final public statements about building movements, Assata said, "We need to work to create a world where the Tupacs of the world can grow and love and not be afraid that some fool with a Glock is going to blow their brains out." This wasn't just about Tupac, it was about every young black person, every talented kid from the hood, every potential revolutionary whose light gets snuffed out before they can fully shine. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.